place, and that is because Rambam points out three things. The Moshiach was about strengthening Torah and mitzvahs, and they changed the Torah and mitzvahs. The Moshiach is about bringing salvation to the Jews and bringing them all back to Eretz Yisrael, and they unfortunately caused Jews to be dispersed all over the world. And the third thing is that they were supposed to bring salvation, and that brought the opposite of life to so many hundreds of thousands of Jews. So then the Rambam adds these very interesting words that we don't understand Hashem's ways. We don't know why Hashem allowed this to happen. But one thing we can say is that as a result of these two movements, Torah and mitzvahs and Mashiach became known to the rest of the world. And apparently this is part of Hashem's plan. Why Hashem chose this way to make that happen, we don't understand. But it means Hashem wanted, in a natural way, the entire world should come to know about Torah and mitzvahs and about Mashiach. And then the Rambam concludes, and when the time comes, they already know about Torah, they know about mitzvahs, they know about Mashiach, but their perception of it is wrong. When Mashiach comes, they'll see that the Torah and the mitzvahs and the Mashiach that they heard about, what's the right way of understanding it, what's correct, and how what they were told was actually wrong. So what I mentioned to you was that as we get closer to the time, we start seeing more and more things that are written in different sources of Torah that this will happen in the future, and we already see it happening now. It's part of the future. So even though I don't usually give out New York Times articles, but this is an article in the New York Times. If you look at the heading, Vatican says Jews wait for Messiah is validated by the Old Testament. I'm not saying Chadashon, we need them to validate our Emunah, but what I'm saying is that when a non-Jew says something nice about a Jew, that's also very beautiful to hear. But when you say the Vatican, you're talking about the movement itself, the source itself of Christian religion is coming out with a statement that's saying perhaps. How do we know what it says? If you read the article, you see that it's about a book that was written by the Pope with hundreds of pages. So I underline a few lines so you don't have to read everything. But what I underlined on the second page, it says he's inspired. He's talking about the Pope at that time, 1990. But what's dangerous in these apologies, apparently in his book, he apologizes to the Jews, is that he seems to say the church itself had been wrong in its teachings, rather than just someone within the church. In other words, it's not that he's saying a certain priest, or a certain teacher, or a certain individual that had a very influential position, he made a mistake, and he misled someone. But he's saying that the religion itself is based on things that might be wrong, which is almost identical to the words of the Rambam. And also on the other side, the last page, where it says, then quoting, these are people who are actual experts in their fields of those religions. He said the document is no way backtracking from their religion, but it does represent a significant shift. So it's not so difficult to see if in 1990, 1991, there was a significant shift. And there's talk about there might be some mistakes in the basic teachings of Christianity being announced by the leaders of that religion, so it won't be so hard and difficult to picture and envision that very soon they'll say how the whole thing was really wrong, and the Torah is true, and mitzvahs are true, and Mashiach, the way it's in Torah, is true, and so on and so forth. It so happens to be that right now, some of the greatest areas where support is coming from Israel, from the United States of America and other places, is dafka from Christians. Christian politicians who are very powerful, which is also something which is unprecedented. And dafka, they are the ones who are pushing that Eretz Yisrael belongs to the Jews, and it belongs to the Jews because it says so in the Torah, not because the British decided to give Jews a piece of land. because it says so in the Torah, and that's critical to the whole thing. The rest of the time I wanted to spend it on speaking on one of the significant days in the Hasidic calendar that's coming up is the day, the 2 days before Sukkot. Today is the 11th, tomorrow is the 12th, and Sunday is the 13th. The 13th of Tishrei was a day that the Rebbe Maharash was nostalgic. Rebbe Maharash was the fourth Rebbe of Chabad, and the reason why I want to specifically speak about this Rebbe today, Rebbe Maharash was the son of the Tzemach Tzedek. He was the father of the fifth Rebbe of Chabad, Rebbe Rashab. The previous Rebbe was his grandson. And you can imagine what the Yontif looked like when he passed away 2 days before the Yontif of Sukkot. The similar thing happened with his father, the Tzemach Tzedek, who passed away on the same day of the month, the 13th, and then it was 2 days before Pesach. But the Rebbe Maharash is known, and it's very, very interesting point. He once said something, as far as we're concerned, he said it once, but the Rebbe repeated this thousands of times. Not only repeated it, this became sort of something almost which defines the Rebbe himself and defines the Rebbe Maharash. And that is, he once said that there's a saying out there in the world, if you can't go under, you go over. So Rebbe Maharash said, and I say, to begin with, just go over. Those were his words. But it needs a lot of interpretation, a lot of explaining, commentary. So the commentary of this could be at a few levels. We're limited in time. This would be, if I bring it on Sukkot, it would be perfect. We'd have a lot of time, but it's not. There's another class following this one. So I'll be brief. And number one level is as follows. It's known that the Baal Shem Tov used to perform miracles to the extent that the whole world knew about his miracles, Jews and non-Jews, and the Baal Shem Tov became identified with miraculous things happening. To the extent that if you tell someone, I want to tell you a miracle story, the first thing that will come to mind is you're probably going to tell me a story about the Baal Shem Tov. And he performed miracles which were open miracles, like things that are very, very open, and you sort of, you can't even convince yourself that, oh, maybe it's something natural. The Baal Shem Tov would tell somebody what he did a few years ago, or exactly what's going to happen a few years in the future, exactly on which day, exactly which moment. These are things which are supernatural. And other Rebbes did similar things, but the Rebbes of Chabad were known, and when the time comes in school, we'll learn more about why. But the Rebbes of Chabad, specifically, even though they performed miracles and helped people in so many different ways, but it wasn't done in an open kind of miracle. It was always done in a way that the Rebbe sort of camouflaged the miracles. It shouldn't be so open and clear. But the Rebbe Maharash was one exception. He did things in a way, openly, which were miraculous, and therefore the term that's used in reference to Rebbe Maharash was that the way he conducted himself was a Baal Shemska Hanhaga, which means in a Baal Shem Tov kind of way. So there are, of course, many stories. I just want to mention one or two, and then go on and explain a little bit more how these words, the Chatchila River, apply to us. I'm sure either you've heard it already, if not, by the end of the year, you'll hear it at least 180 times. The Chatchila River, which means to begin with, go over. What does it mean practically? But first, before practically, it means very simple. There are laws of nature, and we have to deal with the laws of nature. We can't just, poo-poo them away. You have to go to a doctor, you have to go to a lawyer, you need an army to fight wars. And Chatchila River, in one way, means that the Rebbe Maharash did things in a way that were totally beyond nature, and he did not take in consideration the laws of nature. He did things which were openly out of the realm of nature. I'm going to give you one example. And it's an interesting example because I heard this from a Yid, from a Jew, who actually passed away recently at the age of 94, 95. And he heard it from someone when he was 12 years old in Chicago. And that person was present when it happened. So basically, this man saw someone who actually saw the Rebbe Marash. And he told him the story that happened this time of the year. The man said that he himself was not a Chabad chassid, but his father-in-law was. And he was coming to the Rebbe Marash for Yom Tov. And his father-in-law asked him to come along, so he came. And it was before Yom Kippur. The man who always davened and led the davening in the shul, that right after Rosh Hashanah, he got sick. And his condition got worse. So the people in charge of the shul came to the Rebbe Marash and said, who do you recommend we use as a chazan because he's very sick, he won't be able to do it. So the Rebbe says, he'll do it. But he's very sick. He'll do it. Okay, a day or two go by, his condition got even worse. He came again to the Rebbe, he's much worse now. If it was out of the question 2 days ago, it's much more out of the question now. So who do you recommend? So the Rebbe answered, no, he'll do it. This happened another time until finally it was Erev Yom Kippur. Erev Yom Kippur is the day that tonight is called Nidre. And he said, Rebbe, he's already in and out of consciousness. There's no way, even if he becomes well today, he still won't have enough strength to stand up and lead the davening. What should we do? Rebbe Rash said, take him, immerse him in the mikveh 3 times, and it'll be okay. So he said, and again, this man was there at the time that this happened. They took him, he couldn't get out of bed. So they took him with his bed, and they dunked him in the water 3 times. The person was hardly conscious. There's a danger he might not be able to breathe under the water. But they dunked him 3 times. After he got out of the water, started to feel better. He got up, and he was the chazan that night. That's called the Baal Shemska story. That's totally above nature. But now I'll tell you another story before we go into explaining it more on a practical level. This is a story that the previous Rebbe writes in the Simcha, they actually said it, that he heard this from the person that it happened to. There was a city in Russia, in the region which is called Vitebsk, a city called Bachaiko. It was a Jewish area. A lot of Hasidim lived there. Again, this is also with the Rebbe Marash, a lot of Hasidim lived there. And the nobleman who was in charge of that area was a very kind person. And not only kind, he had a lot of respect for the religious Jews. And as a result of that, he exempted them from a lot of different taxes. For example, they didn't have to pay real estate tax. The people who are in a position like a rav or a teacher, people at a spiritual position, he exempted them from paying taxes altogether. A lot of people, he gave them permission that they could use his fields for their animals to pasture on his fields. And almost everybody in the area had their sustenance from working for him in one way or another. This man, in general, had very poor health. All his years, he had poor health. And at a certain point, he became very sick, critically sick. And when that happened, basically there was someone else that took over running his business. And the person who took over, that person, was it his son? Doesn't say. Anyway, he brought in a new priest, which is a very big anti-Semite, and he incited people against the Jews. And not only that, but he claimed that why they all being exempt from taxes and why this and why that. So in the end, this administrator who was running everything about the financial things of the nobleman slowly cut off one person, another person, eventually went back to charging them taxes for all the things they were exempt from. It came to a point that almost every single Jew was affected that they lost their source of income because of this priest. And all this was because the nobleman was sick. As long as he was well, he took care. It wasn't such a problem. Now the Chassidim, of course, they traveled to the Rebbe like all Chassidim, but in those days things were different. In those days, people were much more spiritually in tune, and the Chassid didn't even feel it was appropriate to come to the Rebbe and talk about money, sustenance. You go to the Rebbe to talk about how can I enhance my davening, my learning, my feelings of love and fear of Hashem? How can I become more spiritually sensitive? They were almost embarrassed to talk to the Rebbe about things that have to do with money. So they didn't mention anything. There was one chassid, his name was Reb Shmuel, and this chassid was an influential chassid, pretty much of an activist in his community. And he came to the Rebbe Marash, and he too was quiet. But then the Rebbe Marash asked him, tell me what's doing in your town regarding the income for the Yidden, how are they doing? Now the Rebbe is asking, of course, he wouldn't deny anything, and he told him what happened. When he told the Rebbe what happened, the first thing the Rebbe said to him, why didn't you tell me all this time? Like, why are you concealing this information from me if I can do something about it? And then the Rebbe was deep in thought, and the Rebbe said the following, go back, and the first opportunity that you have to meet the nobleman, tell him that I told you to give this over to him, that for every single family that he's going to help and reinstate their source of income, I promise him a month of healthy life. Okay? So he went back. Problem was that it's very hard to see him because he was sick, so he was indoors all the time. They wouldn't give anybody permission to go see him, especially not a Jew, which they knew he'd probably be complaining. But after being there a day or two, one of the days was a very nice weather, so they took him out to there was a little park around his house. They took him out to catch some fresh air. He was standing at the distance. He was waiting for an opportunity. And he noticed him. He knew him because they did business together. And he called him. They told him, come onto the wagon. They wanted to talk. And immediately he told him what happened with the Rebbe Marash, and what the Rebbe Marash said. And the Rebbe Marash also said that nobody should know about this, just between you and him. So he said, and he knew about the Rebbe Marash, this nobleman. So he said to him, okay, make an account of how many Jewish families there are, and give me the names of all the families, and I'll take care of everything. They made an account. There were 160 families that lived in that area. And sure enough, he started to feel better, even though the doctor said that his situation, I forgot to mention that, the doctor who was this person's doctor, his name was Dr. Heibenthal, he was also the doctor of the Rebbe Marash. And he had told the Rebbe Marash that he is critically ill, that his life, he just has a few months to live. And after this, he became well. But he did exactly what he promised to do. He restored everybody's source of income. He took over the reins and gave everybody back what they had before. So the Friedrich Rebbe said, when he told me the story, he describes who was there as he was telling the story. He said the following, that his whole life he had poor health. During these 14 years, it was 14 years since the Rebbe Marash told him that, he said he wasn't sick once. But now he started to feel weak. And he said, I made an account, and according to my account, he said, I still have another year and 7 months to live. He owes me more time. So he knew the Rebbe Marash was no longer here. But this is a non-Jew. He says, go to the Ohel and tell him that I'm asking, I need to get another 1 year and 7 months. And apparently he went back and he lived for another year and 7 months, and then he passed away. This is another example of a Chatchila river. However, like I said, the Rebbe talks about the Chatchila river a lot on a more practical level. What does it mean on a practical level? So the basic principle is, what does that mean if you can't go under, you go over? It means if you're pursuing something, whether it's something physical, something spiritual, you want to get to a certain place. You want to achieve something, and there are things blocking. Something is in my way. Normally what we do is try to push it out of the way. You push it this way, push it that way. If it's not going, then you push harder. If it doesn't help you, push even harder. That's called going under or going through it. If that doesn't work, then you try to go around it. Try to just pretend that it's not there. Let me try it through a different way. Beat the system, as they call it. Rabbi Majeski said, and my approach is that the way to deal with things that are blocking, the things that are in your way, is to just go over it, and rather than wrestle with it and fight with it and push with it. Now, this can have many different ramifications. I'll try to give a few examples. First of all, there's a very simple example. And the simple example is that sometimes when we talk about good and the opposite, we use different mishalim to describe the good or the opposite of good. One mashal is, for example, a house. If the house is not clean, it's full of garbage, that would be describing a person that his Yetzer Hara gets the better of him, and his thought, and his speech, and his action. There's a lot of garbage there, a lot of things that are not clean, and you have to clean it out. As we learned in the different Maimar Masichas about tshuva, that tshuva is something which cleans anything that's negative, any defect, it cleans any kind of stain that we have on our neshama from an avera. So it causes stains on the soul. And we have to remove those stains through doing tshuva. How do you remove a stain? You wash it. You have to wash it, soap and water, put it in the washing machine, the whole process, how to wash it. So spiritually, this would mean that, let's say you're moving into a new house. You walk into the place and you can't believe what you see, dirt and filth and cobwebs and garbage and dust. So you're not going to move in. First you'll clean up, get a cleaning team to clean up. And after everything is nice and clean, then you'll move in and you'll bring nice, beautiful furniture, which will beautify your apartment. Makes perfect sense. That's the mashal. There's another mashal. The other mashal is using the analogy of darkness and light. If you walk into a room and it's pitch dark, imagine going to this room at night, it's pitch dark. So you have 13, 14 square feet of pitch darkness. What's the seder? What's the order of things? Is it the same way? First you push out the darkness, and then you bring in light. No, that's why we do it. In fact, you can't even push out the darkness. You can't push it out with the vacuum cleaner. You can't push it out with the bat. You can't push it out with the broom. So what do? We light a candle, or we turn on a switch. And once there's light, the darkness disappears by itself. In other words, I'm engaging with the light, not with the darkness. In the first case, I'm engaging with the dirt, with the filth, cleaning, and then I can bring in something positive. The other way is just the opposite. Focus more on the positive, and then you'll see that naturally the negative will disappear because I'm bringing so much light and so much positiveness in me. So this would mean many things. Of course, one of them is, which is also a very famous quote of the Rebbe, but it's related to this, the one about Traggut and Zayngut, which means, God forbid, there's a certain situation and you're worried about the outcome, what's going to be in the future. Someone is sick, what's the prognosis? And you're worried and you're picturing what if this happens, and begging Hashem, pleading with Hashem that He should help. That's called going under. In other words, I'm imagining something might go wrong. I'm imagining that according to the laws of nature, this and this might happen. And then who knows, the ramifications will be very painful. And I'm praying, I'm begging, I'm pleading with Hashem, but I'm giving substance to all those negative things. The Chatchila Riba means don't even go there. Picture in your mind that Hashem is going to give you the right bracha, and this person will be perfectly well, and tomorrow they're going to be, or whenever, with time, they'll be back on their feet and everything will be fine. And that's called bitachon. That's the attribute of bitachon, means confidence in Hashem, to think positive. And if you think positive, it'll become positive. And in many stories, illustrating that, and the Rebbe especially was very much into that people should only think positive and focus on the positive, both, like we said before, when you're dealing with spiritual, negative and positive, and even when you're dealing with physical, negative and positive, don't focus on the negative, focus on the positive, picture that things are going to work out positively, and I trust in Hashem, and that alone will make the positive thing happen. It's known also how the Rebbe answered many people regarding disturbing thoughts. There are certain thoughts that disturb a person. Some thoughts make us frightened. Some thoughts make us have anxiety about the future. Some thoughts make us sad, thinking about the past. And there's this notion that people think that thoughts, you can't control that. Yes, sure.
We should ask Hashem or even the Rebbe for refuah for someone.
No, we have to ask. In fact, it's one of the mitzvahs that if I need something, we ask for a bracha. But what am I thinking? Asking for bracha, Hashem should help me. But most of the time, especially with something serious, then you're imagining who knows what and what if this happened. And these thoughts we shouldn't have. I'll give you an example. The person has a cold, like I have right now. I know I might have to go to a doctor and take something for my cold. But most people don't get hysterical about a cold. Why not? Because a cold is a cold. In a few days, it'll be over. It's not my first cold. But when it comes to other things, you're worried, what if? So what we're saying is, I need to do what I need to do, even go to the doctor and take the medication, the gashmis. Go to davening and ask Hashem for a bracha. Write to the Rebbe for a bracha. But my thoughts are positive. And that's the tochen. And when you have the positive thoughts, that brings the positive results. That's what it is. So the same thing is also with emotional things, that if a person has thoughts that are disturbing, so it's either thoughts that make me depressed about the past, or thoughts that make me feel anxiety about the future, thoughts about myself, what am I doing, what have I accomplished, mistakes that I made, all these kind of thoughts, which usually lead to negative results. So most of the time, people feel that it's just impossible to get rid of it. I try to push it out. The more I push that way, it pushes back. Like a fly. You go like that, it comes back. Push over here, you're back over here. It's on my head, it's on my chest. The thoughts are mamish the same thing. You try to push it out, and the more you push it out, it disappears. The Rebbe says that the way we are supposed to get rid of the thought is not by pushing it out. Because when you push it out, you're giving it substance. The Chatchila Rebbe means, I'll get to you in a second, don't even give it any substance. And just tell yourself, ignore it as if it doesn't exist. And you'll be shocked to find that if you ignore the thought, ignore means not I'm thinking, don't think about this because you're not supposed to think about it. Because when you say that to yourself, you're thinking about it. And by thinking about it, you're giving it substance. I'm just supposed to switch to another subject, get my brain somewhere else, and this will automatically, you can't think about two things at the same time. And that's the Chatchila Rebbe. I'm not even giving it any substance. I'm ignoring it, and that's how it eventually disappears. Yes? Oh, yeah.
Doesn't it talk about pushing thoughts out with two hands? How does that?
That's the point. Let's say if a person has some sort of depressing thought, he says to himself, I shouldn't really be thinking this because I know this will make me depressed. And depression is not good because depression leads to this and that and the other thing. So I shouldn't be thinking about it. What am I doing? In other words, I'm pushing the thought out of my head. I'm telling myself, don't think about it with one hand. But with the other hand, I'm actually holding on to it because I keep thinking about it. Pushing out with two hands means don't think about accepting the thought and don't think about rejecting the thought. Just think about something else. Whatever it is that would sort of capture your attention. And you'll see, I always think of this example that if you're very upset, something just happened and you got very upset. And you're very angry at somebody who just said something very insulting, whatever, imagine. And as you're feeling this feeling of upsetness, you get a phone call. Someone who you can't share what happened, it's a totally different subject, You must answer this person. You're on the phone for a half hour. When you hang up, you're going to say to yourself, what was going on before this phone call? There was something, there was a little storm. That, yeah, right. What happened during the half hour? Because you weren't thinking about it, you didn't feel the pain. So pain is not just what happened, it's also dependent on how much attention I give to what is that happened. I tell the story, which is happened with one of my children, that he was 8 years old at the time. He climbed up on a counter to get something from a high shelf, and he slipped and he fell. And he fell on his chin. And when he fell on his chin, his tongue was between his teeth. So, boom, it made a hole right through his tongue. Anyway, of course, these miracles always happen on Shabbos. We had to rush him to the hospital at summer. There are no doctors, just interns. And they telling us, to the parents, you got to get out of this room. They don't want us in there while they're stitching. Imagine, I can't even talk about how you stitch the tongue of an 8-year-old. Anyway, my son loved to hear stories. He was like mesmerized by stories. So as this is going on, I'm telling him a story. And I'm telling him a story, he stopped crying, and his mouth is wide open, and he's listening. So my wife didn't have to tell her to leave the room. She ran out of the room. Yeah. I kept telling him the story. To this day, I don't remember how it began and how it ended and what was the middle. He went on the roof and he came through the window, and the fireman came and the police came. I was telling him, just going on, and he's listening. I don't know what he heard. And they did 13 stitches on him while he was listening. How is that possible? It's like a mental anesthesia. When you're focusing on something else, you don't feel the pain, even physical pain. There was a Hasidic Rebbe who was called Moshiach, Rebbe of Moshiach, a place in Hungary, that he needed an operation, but he was older, and they felt that he couldn't handle the anesthesia. And this was years ago, so I don't even know. Things were much different then, much more difficult. But he was known, his Hasidic path was very interesting. It was all the focus was on Nigunim. He was a brilliant composer, beautiful, beautiful Hasidic songs. And every month he would compose a new niggin, and the new niggin was the new source of inspiration for that month, for his Hasidic. So he said to them, I'm going to compose a song, and while I'm going to be into the song, you can do the operation. I won't feel any pain. Again, even though he was a tzaddik, and he could have done things maybe miraculously, but this was sort of a natural thing. It was so, when I published it somewhere, I wanted to make sure that I have it right. I called one of the Hasidim from that group, who's actually he was then their most in the world of Nigunim, he was the top person there. And I asked him the story. He said, yes, it's true. The song has 31 stanzas, 31, because it was a long operation. And the song is on words of the davening of Yom Kippur, which we said yesterday. And basically he said that, yes, as long as he did the operation, he felt no pain. The Rebbe also once mentioned the story to bring out the point that when you're focused and you're not thinking, you're not going to feel physical pain. You also won't feel mental pain. But then people will say, so what's the point? That's today. Tomorrow it's going to come back again. But no, the truth is, when a thought is sort of bothering me and harassing me, every time that I ignore it, by pushing it away through ignoring it, not through holding on to it, slowly but surely it stops coming back. And again, I asked many people this question, I'm sure they'll have the same answer. I asked a lot of the girls, tell me when you were in high school, did you have any thought which is like an obsessive thought that couldn't get out of your head? Yeah. And I say, you still have it? Was it whatever the problem was it resolved? Not necessarily. So why did you stop thinking about it? How did it stop? The answer is new problems came up. And she was obsessed with the new problem. She forgot about the old one. And when she didn't think about it, it stopped coming back. Very possible. So it's not easy, but it's doable that we would consciously would concentrate. I remember once gave this class, and somebody came up with a article written by a psychologist, which is really very different because years ago psychology was very much into focusing on the problem and analyzing it and where's it coming from. This is from my grandmother, and this is my great grandmother, this is from my father, this is because of my mother. But the guy wrote an interesting article, almost the same idea, ignore it, but he had an interesting catch to it. He used the words, don't feed the cat. What happens when you feed a cat? Come back tomorrow. And if you put down a little bit more milk tomorrow, he'll come back the next day. So he took the word cat and he said cat stands for counterproductive attitudes and thoughts. Don't feed the cat. If you don't feed it, it won't be coming back. So that's also lichatchila ariba. In other words, if I have negative traits, don't focus on it. This is, if you ever heard the expression, the Rebbe uses it, says, don't talk Lashon Hara on yourself. Don't focus even on the negative things in me. Focus on positive things, strengthen the positive, strengthen the light, learn more Torah, bring more light into my life, into my neshama, and then naturally the negative things will go away. Somebody once asked, why don't we find that in Chassidus there should be a lot of focus on Lashon Hara? In some circles, there's a lot of talk about Lashon Hara. Constantly lectures and discussions and people taking on the chutzpah not to talk Lashon Hara and how bad it is and the damage it does in this world, in the next world, physically, spiritually. In Chassidus, we don't have the focus on, even though Lashon Hara is one of the Averos, not only one of the Averos, one of the worst Averos. There's actually a quoting Gemara that Hashem would be ready to overlook Geulah, Shvichas Damim, Avodah Zarah, which are the three worst things, but not on Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara is equivalent to all three things. So these are very harsh words, and yet why don't you find Chassidus talks about it? So in a certain sense, it's also a lechatchila river kind of thing. Lashon Hara means I see fault in different people, and I have to train myself not to talk about it. In Chassidus, what we try to accomplish is a step ahead. Not only that I see the fault in other people, I train myself not to talk about it, but Abbas Yisrael means I shouldn't see the fault in other people. Just like with ourselves, we don't really see the faults most of the time. A lot of times we need someone else to point it out. So instead of saying, yes, this person is really a bad person, but I'm not going to talk about it, not tell anyone else about it. The Chatchila means I don't even recognize that I see the goodness, I see the beauty, I see the good in this person, which doing that makes me not focus on the negative things. Because we see that's the way we see that with ourselves, we look at things differently. With other people, we look at things differently. It's a famous joke that this woman once spoke about her son and her daughter. She said, my daughter, I'm so happy for her. She's married, and she's such a good marriage, such a happy marriage. She has a husband who's just gold. Every morning when she wakes up, before she even gets out of bed, her husband comes into the bedroom with a tray, with cookies, coffee, tea. He treats her mamish like a queen. My heart just, I can't tell you when I look, I'm so proud, I'm so happy for her. My son, poor guy, he really fell in. His wife treats him like a slave. Every morning he has to come to the bedroom and bring her coffee or tea on a tray. Wow, in one breath. This is a queen and this is a slave. How do you explain this? The answer is this is my daughter getting royal treatment. That's one thing. Or this is my son giving the royal treatment. That's a slave. But unfortunately, a lot of times you talk to people, you can hear that in a conversation. in one sentence, they could be criticizing something. While they're criticizing, they're doing exactly the same thing because we don't see. So Abbas Yisrael means that our love for others should be to the extent, I don't even see a fall that I should have to debate whether I'm going to talk about. It doesn't mean I don't see the facts, but I don't see it in a negative way. I don't see it in a negative light, in a way that because of that I hate the person or I'm angry at the person because we see it from a different perspective. So there are many examples to this, but this is something which the Rebbe says that it's a way in Avodah how we have to serve Hashem in a way of the river in everything, not to focus on the negative, whether it's health, whether it's other issues, whether it's with ourselves, whether it's our spouses. If you focus on the positive and you just try to strengthen the positive, the negative will just fade away and everyone will be just a much, much happier person. To a certain extent, this is also one of the things about Chassidus, that one of the reasons why there was so much opposition to study Chassidus, because Chassidus is very deep spiritual things in Torah. And the approach was that how could you take something so holy when you yourself are not perfect? We have a lot of things to do that we need to clean up our own act before we bring in something so holy. It's like in the Beis Hamikdash. One wasn't allowed to go into the Beis Hamikdash unless they purified themselves in a mikveh before. Why? This is a very holy place, and you can't have holiness contaminated with impurity. So basically, if in Torah in general is holy, but in Torah itself, this is the hidden secrets of Torah. That's why for generations nobody studied it. Only people that are on a very high spiritual level. Why now is different? Amongst the many explanations, one of them is that, on the contrary, today we need to bring in something very powerful, very holy, some brilliant light that will bring in this light, and naturally the negativity will go away. We see this very often with people who are far from Yiddishkeit, so of course they don't have all the light in them from Pesach, Shabbos, Mitzvahs, Torah, because they haven't done it, and yet they start learning Torah, especially starting learning Chassidus, and they're inspired and they're ready to move forward. How is that possible? Because the light that comes in pushes away all the darkness, and that's in a certain sense Chassidus versus approach what's called Musar is the Chatchila River versus the approach of dealing and struggling and wrestling with the negative things. So I guess if this is his day, the Chatchila River, in fact, the Rebbe doesn't, a lot of times didn't call him by his name. He would say, sing the niggin of the Chatchila River. Tell him the story of the Chatchila River. We're not going to give over words of Torah from the as if the word the Chatchila River became his name. And so obviously he personifies the whole idea of the Chatchila River. And on that day, which is the 13th of Tishrei, gives us the strength to, and that's the same with Simcha, not to focus on, that's how we can be the Simcha, not to focus on the things which bring the opposite, but to be the Simcha and have complete confidence in Hashem, and all the things that are troubling us will be moved out of the way. And Simcha, hopefully, getting close to this hard to believe 2 years of October 7th, which happened in Simchas Torah. So we have to hope to the Eibusher that by this year, Simchas Torah will all be celebrating a real celebration in Yerushalayim with Moshiach. Okay, like I said, there's dozens and dozens of things to talk about, but hopefully you got enough from Rabbi Geulah on the subject to have an inspiring sukkahs. Good job to everybody.
Hi, Rabbi Majeski. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Yes.
Oh,